The nature of this offense is very disturbing. The facts surrounding this entire scenario of events is most disturbing.
That's Charleston Magistrate Judge James Gosnell Jr. ruling on a bond hearing in 2014. 11 years later, he would be on the receiving end of those comments his own bond denied after federal authorities say they found a flash drive at his home containing hundreds of images of child pornography. Today, investigative reporter Emily Johnson breaks down what we know about the case and the shockwaves rippling through the judicial community. I'm Nick Reagan, and this is a Live 5 Deep Dive. Emily, today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most shocking cases that I have seen in a very, very long time. Just accusations that I think a normal person would look at and just be completely appalled and hope that the allegations are not true. We're talking about suspended judge James Gosnell Jr., 68-year-old, works here in the Charleston area, who has been accused of having hundreds of files of child sexual abuse material. Now, the federal statute here, this federal charge, is technically called child pornography, but we do want to make the distinction that there's a shift in legal spheres to move away from child pornography to child sexual abuse material so that it properly reflects what these charges are. So that's what we're going to be using in this podcast to talk about some of the things that Gosnell is accused of having and also doing. Because, again, the stuff in these federal documents are truly shocking. But let's start off with how we got here. Lay out the timeline for me in terms of when federal authorities were first on to Gosnell and where we are now.
Once these documents started coming out, we found out that the tip was received from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children back in December of last year, so almost a year ago. And the tip was that there was purchases of child sexual abuse materials from the United Kingdom, and that tip ended up bringing investigators back to Gosnell. And once they kind of started discovering that, basically it was mainly images that were found on this app called Telegram, which kind of comes up throughout the investigation. But once these materials were discovered, it took agents a long time to put together the entire case. And agents did not actually show up to Gosnell's home until September 16th, just a few weeks ago. And kind of that interaction in itself is what started to involve this investigation into something completely different than what they thought in the beginning. Right.
Federal authorities thought they were coming for one thing. They found something else. But just to reiterate the point, though, this all started at a tip that was made to federal authorities about these purchases that were being made over in the UK through PayPal accounts. One of those accounts traced back to Gosnell. Then federal authorities showed up at his house on the 16th. What happened next?
Once they showed up, Gosnell actually admitted almost instantly to having these materials, but not for what federal agency originally thought they were going to find, which were these payments and these images from the UK operation. He basically admitted to something completely different and almost, we don't know this for sure, but to me, blew the federal investigation much larger, the scope much larger, and the investigators kind of had to be like, oh, we thought we were coming here to charge you with this. Now we're talking about a larger scheme almost.
Yeah, it was a big twist in the paperwork because originally the first set of documents laid out this idea and these payments for child sex abuse material. Federal authorities showed up to his house and he said, I know why you're here, but it's not for what you think. I did not make those payments. That's fraud. And he said that what happened in the UK or what happened with those payments to the provider in the UK was a hack. Mm-hmm. But then he says to federal authorities,
Just wait.
I do have child sexual abuse material on a flash drive in my front bedroom. And they retrieve it, and there's content on there. What did they find on that flash drive?
On the flash drive, they found hundreds of photos and videos really showing child sexual abuse. And Gosnell basically gave this flash drive to investigators saying, yeah, the other stuff I didn't do, but here's what I did. And that's kind of where everything began, with him basically admitting that right when they showed up to his door.
Now, sometimes in these cases, there are fringe cases. Child sex abuse material is never okay. But occasionally, these things are not as bad as they sound based on the charges. As charges make them sound awful, sometimes individual cases are not as awful as we think. This is not that scenario.
Absolutely not. And we've done a ton of investigating into sexual materials in general, and this is a different beast than when we see these charges normally, where it's maybe a few materials in a group chat or something like that, which is still not okay to your point,
Right.
but this is beyond that.
The federal paperwork actually lays out 3 very explicit examples of what they found. Again, this was on that raid, that first raid that they went to his house. And these are images that they say were accessed as early as days and weeks before. So
Very recently.
yeah. And originally Gosnell had said something like, I haven't purchased child sexual abuse material, again, all allegedly, in years. But these images that they put out in this federal document says they were accessed recently, days, weeks before. And we're talking about babies. We're talking about toddlers. We're talking about very young people, a prepubescent male, an infant that they describe as having a pacifier in their mouth, tied up with ropes around their wrists and ankles. These are the kinds of images that they found. I'm assuming that they put the worst of the worst stuff in these documents, but that's about as bad as it gets, right?
I mean, you can't imagine anything worse. And we've read, unfortunately, so many descriptive and graphic testimonies of these cases. And personally, I've never read that age and the type of situations these children were in is just, it gives me the chills even talking about it now. We're weeks after we first found out about this, but it truly did kind of take everyone aback. And that's just the first part of this investigation.
So then he's arrested.
Yep.
And he gets an initial bond hearing, which happens within 24 hours of being arrested. What happens at that bond hearing?
Well, first off, the bond hearing, it's in federal courthouse, so there's no cameras. I wish we could have taken y'all in there with us to be able to see. I think it's always very interesting to see his demeanor, kind of what he looks like, Gosnell. But I was in the room, and really his attorney, who's Lionel Lofton, he basically said, my client, yes, he did have the materials. He viewed them, but he did not distribute any. That means that he should get out on bond. And the judge and the Department of Justice basically argue and say, no, that does not mean he should get any bond. He should still remain behind bars because he could be a threat to the community. And the judge agrees with the state. So he ends up being held behind bars for that weekend until he has a hearing again on Monday.
Right. And they're expecting on that hearing on Monday that they're going to basically ask for bond again.
Yep. And that's what the attorney told us. His attorney told us right after there was a quick little time that he spoke with media.
Well, I'm very disappointed that the judge didn't give us a bond this morning, but we'll be back Monday. We'll fight for a bond then, so that's all I've got to say.
I believe in my client's innocence. I'm going to continue to fight for him to get out on bond next Monday. And then we kind of get to this next level.
So we've laid out the fact that, according to his own words in this federal document, that Gosnell has admitted to having child sex abuse material, and it's pretty bad. But it gets worse.
Much worse.
When we get to Monday, when he has another court appearance. What happens on Monday?
The Department of Justice put out this entire motion, and these allegations are unlike anything that I've personally ever seen before.
I'm Brian Sterling, U.S. Attorney for the District of South Carolina. Just for purposes.
The day that Gosnell had that first court appearance, federal authorities started digging deeper, and they raided his office. They took his cell phone. They took a bunch of other devices, and they started digging through there. One of the things they dug through was his Telegram app, that social media app that is used to communicate with people. And what they found in there were his communications with, as the federal authorities put it, other like-minded individuals. And the federal authorities call them pedophiles.
And that they have this similar interest in seeing children in these positions. And once they saw it on this app, that's where really everything kind of exploded. Because on that app is where Gosnell, is seen communicating with a Florida man who we still don't know the name of, where it is Gosnell admitting to going out to Mexico to have sex with a 3 and 5-year-old kid. Gosnell and this man in Florida basically planning a trip in November for him to go out to Florida so they could, I think it was rape and kill this Florida man's infant nephew.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that, it's selfies of Gosnell with kids in his own neighborhood in West Ashley. It's a West Ashley neighborhood. And it is selfies with children in the neighborhood, very young. I mean, we're talking months sometimes.
Those text messages, those Telegram messages, as you mentioned, not just laid out this idea that Gosnell not just had child sex abuse material, but also was talking about in-person assaults of babies.
Our investigation has revealed that Gosnell claims to have abused very young children. If you have left your child alone with Gosnell, even let him hold your child, please email the tip line, which we've set up, and we will hand you.
One of the victims, 3 months old, he said he was keeping that child for a neighbor whose babysitter had called out. He told the Florida man he abused a 5-month-old, a neighbor's baby that he was holding for her, touching the child under blankets. A victim was a 2-year-old. He took a selfie with that child and sent it in one of these chats saying, "My new buddy." He says he sexually assaulted her. There's a 2-year-old and a 2-week-old as well that he took pictures with. He said he orally assaulted one of those children. As you mentioned, he traveled to Mexico, and he's saying this. This is,
It's
again,
all his own words.
in the federal documents. These are messages that the feds picked up through Telegram in which he's saying he's done all these things. In Mexico is a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old that he says that the mother, which he describes as being addicted to meth, had sold her kids for a few hours. I mean, these charges, these accusations are pretty, they're pretty disturbing, especially for a man who is in a position of power.
One of the members of the South Carolina Attorney's Office that we spoke to after one of these hearings said not only was he in a position of power, but he was in a position of trust.
Until proven guilty in a court of law, James Gosnell was appointed to a position of trust to protect the community from criminals amongst us. But as detailed in the government's detention memorandum, he is alleged to have abused and exploited the most vulnerable, which are infants and toddlers.
Which is what I think has shook everyone, because he was a very well-known member of the community, and neighbors have said also he drove a golf cart around the neighborhood wanting to hang out with kids, and obviously they trusted him. He's a judge.
One more thing that came out in these documents, he's accused, or rather it says in there, that he had promoted Zoom meetings, presumably, in which he would teach other pedophiles, quote, the tricks of the trade. I mean, have you ever seen that in a child sexual abuse materials case?
Absolutely not. I've never seen someone openly admitting over communications as blatantly as these are, with selfies, with almost like stories of what happened, and that alone wanting to pass his, quote, tricks of the trade over to other individuals. It's just beyond having materials and looking at materials from a different country. This is him admitting to traveling to other countries, to having sexual interactions with children, doing that to neighbors, planning to help other people do it as well. It is just, I can't even imagine another thing that he could have done in this that could be worse, honestly.
Now, at the end of that second appearance, that second bond hearing, bond was denied.
Yep.
And he remains behind bars.
And this is when we had been told, a few days before, oh, we're going to try and get that bond. They didn't even attempt to get bond once they saw these additional details from the state.
So this has made headlines, and it has sent shockwaves through the community.
100%.
I know that you and I both have had conversations with our sort of lawyer sources and other sources, law enforcement sources, that have all basically said the same thing, which is that Gosnell was kind of a pillar in the judicial community. And these charges are shocking.
Every single person, like attorneys that have worked with him for years, have said, I knew him like a friend. You know, when you're in a legal sphere as small as Charleston, judges and attorneys interact a lot.
A lot.
And every attorney has just been like, I never would have expected this from him.
Yeah, I mean, in law enforcement as well. You know, one of the things that was told to me is that he's an extroverted man, and he went to all of the functions. He shook hands with all of the people. You know, he was everywhere, and people knew who he was. And like you said, nobody would have, even if you had problems with him, even if you disagreed with him professionally or politically, like, these charges are insane. What he's accused of are things that nobody would have suspected. And unfortunately, there is now a pattern of people in positions of power in South Carolina having these secret double lives with heinous charges, heinous accusations. Saw Representative R.J. May just pled guilty to some of these child sex abuse materials charges. And there could be some there will be some real world implications should these charges be, should he be found guilty on these charges. Talk to me a little bit, though, about some of the holes in this case. In particular, we have documents that say all of these things, but so far, we don't know about evidence.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think that's probably what investigators are struggling with right now. And they've actually reached out to us, the media, to make sure the public can fully understand why they need victims to come forward, because this is all, at least the second part of this investigation, kind of the big reveal, is a lot of him just bragging of things, saying, I went to here, I did this with my neighbor children, all these things, but there's not really concrete evidence. It is not a trail. I mean, some of these children can't even speak yet.
I mean, we know people are different online, and I think we're all hoping that he was making things up to sound cool online to
his buddy in Florida.
And I think that is going to be the hard part for prosecutors, is how do we get the evidence of the things he says he's done? Especially, like you said, some of these children can't even speak, right? And so now people have to have conversations with their very young children. And I've
had a few off the record conversations with members of the community who knew Gosnell, you know, within family, friends or whatnot. And they're having to have these conversations. Like a 12-year-old boy that I was told about, he had, you know, been a few years younger when he had met Gosnell, but the mother had to say, I don't want to have this conversation with you, but I need to ask, did he ever touch you? Did he ever do anything? That is going to be, like we said, the hardest thing, but also I think the most emotional part of this entire story is really the impact and maybe the lack of answers that we'll ever be able to get from the children that he alleged to do this to, because they can't speak for themselves. The thing is, we don't even know how many charges he's facing,
right,
what extent, because of the ongoing nature of this investigation. And even with the first kind of part of this entire evidence being presented, the charges were never listed out. We know it relates to child sexual abuse materials, but we don't know how many. It could be 30, it could be 2. It really depends on what they find.
Right.
And that's why they need people to come forward. And I'm assuming they're trying to prove the Mexico allegations, all of that are not, you know, I think they're just trying to put it all together, put the pieces together.
And he was just in Amsterdam as well, that they're going to be looking into that travel as well to see what they can find. So what happens next?
It's a great question. I think under federal law, federal courts move a lot differently than local courts. They have to do everything within a certain time frame. So we're not going to be looking at this like we do with some other local cases where we're talking about this in 2 years. We're saying they finally got their trial date. This is going to be within the next, I don't know the number of days off the top of my head, but within the next few months will be the trial. It has to be, because they have this limit. And so it's not on the calendar yet, but we're not going to be waiting a few years for this.
You're looking at life in prison.
Well, and especially, I mean, he's 68 years old.
Right.
We're probably speculating, but we're probably talking about a life sentence for him no matter what, no
Right.
matter how many years he gets.
Yeah.
And we don't even know the magnitude yet. And I think it's interesting when you were talking about if he pleads or if we go to a trial. Normally in these sexual abuse material cases, there's no direct victims. A lot of the times it's a photo that's been passed from country to country, we've seen in these investigations, or almost like a no-named individual. But this, we're really more so talking about, this could be one of those cases where there are actual witnesses to the alleged abuse, they could actually be victims that might speak. So I wonder if that will play into
Right.
a fact of maybe prosecutors wanting to go to trial or not wanting to put them through this.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see where all this leads. Of course, we're going to continue to follow this, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this again. We should also mention that all of these court documents that we have are on our website, and if you want to read the explicit descriptions of the materials that were found and some of the things that he said allegedly, you can find them on our website and read them for yourselves. Quite frankly, they're too graphic to read,
us to read word for
word.
And also, before we wrap, the United States Department of Justice did ask if your child or anyone you know was ever alone or even held by Gosnell. They want you to notify their tip line. And just to share for everyone, it's Charleston_exploitation tips at hsi.dhs.gov. Because they're really trying to look for any pieces of the puzzle right now.
So if you have children and you've interacted with Gosnell, unfortunately, you're going to have that conversation and find out, whether or not there was an experience or an interaction that is suspicious. And if there is, the federal authorities want you to report that so they can get this case going.